بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله وكفاه والصلاة والسلام على رسوله المصطفى وعلى عباده الذين ارتضى ومن بهداهم اهتدى وبآثار أهل المدينة اقتفى وبعد فالسلام الله عليكم ورحمته تعالى وبركاته. أهلا وسهلا بكم ومرحبا. We're going to take a look at a question today on Isbal, and that is to wear, and it's especially for men, it's about wearing their trousers below their ankles, as in they allow it to hang below, so you don't have your ankles uncovered. Whether you are wearing some trousers, jeans, or whether you are wearing some form of thobe, an Arabic type of dress, or whether you're wearing something like shalwar kameez or whatever you have on, if you allow the garment to have covered your ankles and hang below, this is called Isbal in Arabic, from the verb asbala yusbilu, فهو musbil. Okay, and they say min italatil thobe. Now the thing is this haram? So to those of you who don't know this, it might explain the concept that when you've seen some people before they pray salah, they kind of fold up their trousers or things like this, and you may have wondered, well, why are they doing that? Well, it's in line with this thought that Isbal is haram. There are certain ahadith that speak on this and actually condemn this. So this is why the question. Well, first of all, the answer is that if it is not done with arrogance, if it is not done as almost to demonstrate pride, then in that case it is not haram. Okay, it may be makruh or it may just be permissible, and if it is makruh, we're talking about not a haram category as some people categorize it as haram. We're talking, the Malikiya don't usually categorize things makruh as a haram. They just have makruh, which is still part of the permissible. Okay, so just to kind of clarify, and then I'll go into this slightly, that it is not haram. So you may wear your garments below or to cover the ankles for men, and that is not haram provided it is not done in a sense of arrogance. Now let's take a look at some of the ahadith. Now there are some hadith where the Prophet ﷺ has mentioned that he said, Man jarra thawbahu, or in some narrations it says izar, that whosoever drags his, whether izar is the type of what they wore, the Arabs wore beneath in general, they call that an izar. It's like a sarong, and or it could have been the long thobes, the jalabiyah, whatever you want to call it today, nowadays, whether you want to call it a jilbab or a thobe, or that was the common dress of the Arabs back then. And so the Prophet ﷺ mentions about whosoever drags a thobe or an izar, that there's different narrations, but they are all quite similar, that in some the Prophet ﷺ says, La yanzuru Allahu ilayhi yawm al-qiyam, that Allah will not look at that person on the day of judgment. In another version it mentions that whoever does that, and it says Man jarra thawbahu khuyala or bataran, that whoever does this out of as I mentioned, out of khuyala, out of pride or arrogance, that Allah will not look at a person like that, or that is in the hellfire, as it appears in some of the wordings. So as you can see, all of these are quite harsh. A lot of these ahadith are quite harsh, and therefore it's led to this issue that how can you allow anybody to wear their garment beneath any man to wear their garment beneath the ankle, when the hadith is so clear in condemning such things? You see, the answer is quite clear actually, that every single narration mentions with it khuyala or bataran, or it mentions these things. Okay. So the fact that, and they mean out of arrogance or pride or kind of looking down on other people, these are the reasons, these are the elements of tahrim. These things have caused it to be haram. Okay. Now, if that was not there, it would not be haram. And you see there is a hadith where Abu Bakr radiallahu an, he would often, his garment would kind of hang below, sometimes below the ankles, and once or twice it was mentioned in front of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he says, "Inna izari yasqut min ahadi shiqi," that because at the time he was incredibly slim, and the way he would tie the izar, that it would kind of lower down to be below the ankles, even though he would raise it sometimes, but it would still it would just naturally kind of just glide down time to time. So he complains about that to the Prophet ﷺ, saying that, look, because the hadith is so strong that this is what happens. And the Prophet ﷺ said to him in a hadith that lasta minhum. Okay, and this is it's transmitted, it's in Sahih Bukhari, and it's transmitted in other books as well. The Prophet ﷺ says to him that, Abu Bakr, you are not from amongst them. Okay, and here the question arises that when you're saying amongst them, who are we talking about? And we're talking about those people who are of that category that do that with pride. And pride here, I mean by that a negative sense. I don't mean, because pride can also, it's a neutral word in English. I mean, in fact, it's more positive at times. But in Arabic, the term arrogance, so in that arrogant sense of pride, that's what the Prophet ﷺ was talking about. And this is where many ulama have spoken clearly on it. You have people like Ibn Abi Zayd al-Qayrawani, who is known as Young Malik, in his Risala, where he says, وَلَا يَجُرُّ الرَّجُلْ إِزَارَهُ بَطَرًا, that a person should not kind of drag his garment out of arrogance, وَلَا ثَوْبَهُ مِنَ الْخُيَلَاءِ, and aura of this type of pride. He says, وَلْيَكُنْ إِلَى الْكَعْبَيْنِ, and let it be to the ankles, as in above, and that is better for the cloth, and so on. And then he says, that this, the way he's kind of he's written it out, mentioning, he emphasizes, he has written the term lil khuyala or batar, and this is where a lot of the commentators have elaborated by saying that he يقتضي أنه يجوز للرجل أن يجر ثوبه أو إزاره إذا لم يقصد بذلك كبرا أو عجبا, that if a person wasn't doing it out of this sense of arrogance, what we find is that it is permissible in that case. And this is what many of the ulama have mentioned, especially within the Maliki madhab. You find Ibn Abd al-Barr, he also, when commenting on that, mentions that all of the riwayat, they mention khuyala or batar or things like this, none of them are without that. Therefore, we restrict this hadith to that understanding. And similarly, Imam al-Nawawi mentions a very similar thing. He says that yahrum, that it is haram lil khuyala, otherwise wa yukrah li ghayr al khuyala, otherwise it may just be makruh. Okay, so this is what you're seeing from a variety of scholars on the matter, and you have even a transmission from Ibn Taymiyyah in his Sharh al-Umda. He mentions وَيُكْرَهُ إِسْبَالُ الْقَمِيص وَنَحْوَهُ إِسْبَالُ الرِّدَاء وَإِسْبَالُ السَّرَاوِيلِ وَالْإِزَارُ نَحْوَهُمَا إِذَا كَانَ عَلَى وَجْهِ الْخُيَلَاءِ. And he then obviously goes into mentioning that وَأَطْلَقَ جَمَاعَةٌ مِنْ أَصْحَابِنَا لَفْظُ الْكَرَاهَةِ وَصَرَّحَ غَيْرُ وَاحِدٍ مِنْهُمْ بأن ذلك حرام. And then he says that a lot of them have said this and they mean by that to be haram, and he takes that stance that that is what it will be. Although some of the ulama amongst them then say that, look, this the key point here is the element of kibr. And that is what, as I mentioned, many of the ulama like Ibn Abdul Bar and Hafid Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani and many of these ulama explain this hadith to be. So with that, people, I hope that makes sense. You are allowed to do that. The question is really, it ties into context. In our day and age, it is not a sign of arrogance to have your garment cover your ankle. In fact, it is seen as quite normal. The opposite, the contrary to that, would be seen as very weird in many places. It would be seen as odd, and it would attract unwarranted attention. Therefore, it would be contrary to the maqasid, the objectives of that ruling. If anything, I would say sometimes we see people who are so harsh about these rulings. But I mean, I've already mentioned with evidence and the ulama that have said it, whether it's Ibn Hajar, whether it's I've mentioned before Ibn Abdul Bar or Al-Adawi and all of these other ulama that have spoken on the matter. Now, so that's quite clear. However, in light of the harshness that we see sometimes from people in condemning this in our societies, where it's absolutely normal and it's seen as abnormal not to be doing it, really is almost, it's an undersight really, and it just shows an absence of understanding and comprehension when it comes to the maqasid of the Sharia. If anything, I would say that this ruling in our society is better suited for people who seem to hang their trousers down below, as in they let it drop. They don't tie them up properly and let it kind of drop below, and I'm sure you've all seen this phenomenon. If anything, that is where they should really refocus this understanding of the hadith, as opposed to the uncovering of the ankles. So okay, so that's once again, in summary, it is permissible as long as it is not done with an intention of arrogance, which once again in our societies seldom exists. Jazakumullah al-khair, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.